Was a, I can mention a Stranko panel, but I'll go to Gil Kane.
Okay.
There was a Gil Kane panel where it was in an issue of Hawk and Dove, and the scene was a kid gets hit by a car and is dead or injured, and Gil didn't show it. What he did show was the kid's shoe flying into the air and landing on the ground. And I thought, that's an interesting way of telling a story. And I used that 30 years later in a Punisher issue, where a character was lighting a cigarette, and he had a pack of cigarettes in his hand, and he got shot and he got killed. And I showed just the cigarette dropping and the package of cigarettes. So, you know, you learn from these panels, and you know, they stay with you.
Yes.
It's really amazing.
So, David, your favorite comic panel?
It was that. It's the kind of stuff you're talking about, where
like
it kind of opens. Yeah, it
Yes.
opens your eyes up to that. You know, a lot of that like was the early, you know, Miller Janson stuff, but also Stranko for me also.
Really?
And Stranko was kind of like a mentor to me, like in the.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when I was starting Kabuki, well, I met him in '95, and he was a character. Like he said, like, oh, so people were, you know, telling me about. I won't go into the details of what he said, but it was. I remember.
I'm sure it's very entertaining.
It was. Yeah, I don't want to embarrass him or anything, but he gave me his card. I mean, I was like probably 20 years old. You know, I had a couple of issues of Kabuki out.
He's a very friendly guy.
Yeah, he gave me his card, that preview card, and he told me to call him in the middle of the night.
Seriously?
You know, if I call him, make sure it's after midnight, is what he says. You know, this is back when people give you cards.
Yeah.
It wasn't cell phones, and you
No.
would, you know, call conventionally. And we would have phone conversations very often. All
Like 2 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, 2 o'clock. And sometimes, yeah, he would call me 2, 3, sometimes later in the morning.
Amazing.
And like while you know, I was in my early 20s and stuff, and I would be talking to him about what I'm working on. And this is the I had a fax machine. You know, this is back. I would send, you know, oh, this is my new page.
Sketches and say,
fax
this is
my
my
new Kabuki page. Yeah, and Brian Bendis and I would do this too. We had fax machines. We're like, hey, here's the page I did. Here's the page I did, and we talk about, you know, our storytelling choices and so on. And yes, Steranko, and he would always say, hey, David, if there's anything I can ever help you with, let me know. And eventually, he said that, and I said, well, you know, I finished the Kabuki story, I'm going to collect it in a collection. Would you write the introduction? And he did.
Wow.
And he would keep saying that. So when I moved Kabuki to Image Comics, he kept saying it. I said, well, I'm starting a new series at Image Comics. Would you do a cover? And he painted a cover for it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and he was, you know, he's still, you know, we're still every time I see him, we're still.
Wow.
What was his advice to you when you sent him pages?
Oh, he always had a lot to say, and he didn't hold back if he thought something didn't work too. You know, he would definitely give bold advice about stuff. You know, it was interesting for him to say, well, there was even a time where he said, hey, I saw that one thing you did, that was a mess. You know, he would say that as well. And then, you know, and then times where he was like, oh, I thought that was very clever. You know, I could tell he was fascinated with what I was doing because I had his attention, and he would talk about it and stuff. But yeah, he wasn't shy about saying if it, you know, this one wasn't one of your better choices. You know?
Right. I find, and I'm not sure if this is true, but when I hear a story like this, I find that comic book people, if you find them at the right moment, they're willing to spill their guts over the phone, right?
Yes.
I mean, that they're more than willing to talk to you and spend hours. And I think Gil Kane was like that with Howard Chaykin, right? But I think that there's a certain loneliness to working, you know, at home, you know, and you don't get out as much as, say, or you don't interact. But it's interesting that Steranko would, you know, spend time with you.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So we've got time for one more question. Gentleman at the front.
Yeah, Dave, we kind of followed you with the State Department thing. Sarah and I went to Algiers with the State Department. We were much safer though. It wasn't crazy. Like people loved us with the fib. It was called the fibda. It's in French, so I don't ask me the words like example. But it's a book festival in Algeria. And we were there for a week in 2019, and there's a tent full of this big popular cultural event. I think it's like their own convention out there. And, that year the U.S. was hosting, so they brought the most artists there. So it was Lika Martinez that brought us out there. And she went the year before in 2018. I mean, she followed you, and in 2018 she followed. In 2019 she followed about 14 other artists, including myself and Sarah here. And we had a great time out in Algeria with people and other artists from other countries, Cuba, Poland, Belgium too.
Yeah, no, there were artists from all over the world. It was absolutely an incredible, life-changing. There is no way of stating how much it changed my whole perspective on.
She was a rock star out there. They loved her. She was cosplaying. It was judging.
You know, there's really something to be said for going to like a place where you know very little about the situation, and you get to see what it's like to be seen as the person who doesn't fit in necessarily or isn't from there, and how they view you and how you interact. And I had that kind of I had that experience like in China. I was in places in China where there weren't any foreigners, and then people would come up to you and like touch you and like look at you and want to take a photo, and like you get to see what it's like to be like the one who's like the totally different person, and they're curious about you, or they might make certain judgments or assumptions and talk to you, and like there's something to that is like very useful to to learn from.
Cool. Okay, so
that's amazing that you're able
that is incredible.
To have that experience.
Thank you.
Yeah, all of those experiences I had too. Like I treasure them. Like they definitely shaped me. Every time you do that, you can't help but be like shaped by that experience.
So I'm going to thank Klaus and thank David and thanks everyone for coming.
David Mack!
Copies of the book are available downstairs. But before people leave, I'm going to give out a copy of this to the first person who answers the question I'm going to ask. So it's a Tripwire question. So which well-known Scottish comic writer used to do columns for us in the early days? So anyone? Sorry?
Ian Banks?
No. Sorry, Jamie. Anyone else? The clue's in the question. Well-known. Sorry? From famous Scottish comic writer. Anyone?
Mark Moore.
I'll give it. You can have it because it was actually Grant, but Mark did do a couple of columns for us. Who said that? Was that you? Who said that? Was it?
He said Mark Millar.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't forget that.
Oh, man.
That's a hard one to find.
I know, right? I had read about